What is your opinion on Rh blood type? If you're asking in regards to the biblically, not a lot. Um, Rh blood is obviously it's rather rare. I mean, it's unique in the sense that it tends to be more prone to having immunoresponse reactions. And obviously, if a mother gets pregnant and she's Rh positive and the baby's negative, or vice versa, I forget, they have to give a RhoGAM shot, because otherwise she'll make antibodies that'll attack the fetus. That's really my only opinion on that. As far as I think that it's good to look into bloodlines, but I think that they can go too far. I think that's why Paul in the Bible said, "Don't get hung up on genealogies," because then you start grouping a whole. Just like somebody had said to me the other day, you can't group like the Kennedy family. The Kennedy family is one of the 13 bloodlines. They are. So is Onassis, Jackie O. Onassis was one of the third. And I mean, I think it's kind of safe to say that those 13 families, they follow a different path altogether. However, I understood what the person was saying to me the other day. That you can't group everybody together. Absolutely agree. Totally agree. Would never do that. However, with RFK Jr., I looked into his deeds are craziness. Craziness with the dead animals. And I mean, I don't know if anybody saw that video, but yeah, I mean, that's just craziness there. So I don't base it just because he's a Kennedy or say all the Kennedy. There's just, you look into each individual. So as far as biblically, I don't put a lot of emphasis on it. Just like people think that the book of Enoch, for instance, who has a total long genealogy in there, yet the book of Enoch wasn't hidden from anybody. Anybody can go listen to it on YouTube. It is a fascinating book to listen to. It is all about the fallen angels. That said, they didn't leave it out of the Bible because they were trying to hide it from people. If they wanted to hide it, they would have hid it altogether. They left it out because the Bible was strictly following, it was first century writers, and there was a strict criteria to be in the Bible, to be in the Bible. So, but yet I think it's a good book to listen to, just because in the book of Jude, which is second to the last book of Revelations, Jude talks about, Enoch's talked about in the Bibles anyway. But the watchers on the wall are talked about in the book of Jude, which the book of Enoch, which isn't in the Bible, goes full into that. It just wasn't a writer that they couldn't place it in the Bible for the reasons of the time that it was written. That said, it's still an interesting book to listen to or to read. But it has this whole genealogy. And then at the end, it's, Satan is the father. Okay, so that's dangerous too, because it's very clear that sin came into the world because of man. Because of man. Like, so we don't get to say to God, hey, Satan made me do it. Come on, God, Satan made me do it. Yeah, that's why God said to be born again, which is also why probably the bloodlines don't matter. But there's so many people, like here, look, here, this is a perfect example why to read this, because they kind of go, in a way, speaking of the DNA stuff. So this was somebody very, very angry with me on YouTube. This is all in caps, a bunch of emojis, and a big red question marks and exclamation points. What's the difference between the Genesis 6 men of renown DNA and the men of renown famous in the congregation of Numbers 16:2? DNA, multiply, you cannot. Thumbs down, you choke under pressure. Yeah, okay, so like really angry, whatever. Well, so I'm not really, it's very confusing. So the difference is, if there's a difference, I guess you could say, is that Genesis, the Genesis talks about the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These were individuals that were referred to as mighty men. They were famous men. They were often had legacies, but they were also often what was tied to increasing wickedness on earth that led to God's judgment through the flood. The Nephilim is talked about. Now, back in those days, those people were used to living with these giants. These giants, like David and Goliath. David went up against Goliath. Some of them, they lived that way because God said the Nephilim, the giant, they would be there for 500 years. So think David against Goliath. That's why David's faith was so strong, because he put all this. He was able to fight that giant. Took him out because of God. But as far as these two different verses, and then Numbers, what did it? Numbers 16:2 is that Numbers that this is talking about is the renowned men of Israel that were the part of the congregation, and they rebelled against Moses. Well, they did the same thing that Satan was doing, right? And maybe that's what this person's trying to get to. Not really sure. But it doesn't show them as being like giants or anything. They just rebelled because they fell into pride. That's why it's really important that even if you don't like your leader, you don't want to go too far in your rebellion, because regardless if you get a good leader or bad, you're getting it because you're supposed to look at yourself. Really. God raises up the leaders. If you believe in the Bible, he does. So when you get tyrannical leaders, even though the left right now wants to say how tyrannical Trump is, a lot of us would say, no, Trump's trying to restore order in a place that's been totally out of order. And the left is now, those that are still on the left are never going to see that. And again, you got to wonder with them, the seeds of Cain, maybe. I'm just kidding. You got it, my son. I don't know. I'm just kidding, sort of. But that's the reason why we can't really pay attention to bloodline. Otherwise, we would be like, the left, they probably all have the same blood type, and that's not fair. That said, we can't blame Satan, even though Jesus tells us the whole world lies with the wicked one. It's still on us. It's still on us. And then even if we do fall astray, because we're supposed to strive for holiness, but we shouldn't be being as deceived as we were if we're walking close to God. He protects us from that. But sometimes you get tested by it too. So, but we don't get the excuse of, it's Satan's fault. So I'm not really sure what this question is saying. I guess maybe there's not a difference. They both fell. The angels so Genesis 6 is talking about the sons of God. The angels were often referred to as sons of God. So Genesis 6:4 is talking about the offspring of the sons of God, which is the Nephilim. I don't know if what this commenter is trying to say is they're the same. I don't think so, but because it doesn't describe them as giants, because they come when they come upon the Canaanite city is when they realize about the Israelites find out there's these giant human beings. So no, it's the difference between the two is that the Genesis 6 is talking about giants, the Nephilim, and then Numbers 16:2 is talking about people that fell into the same patterns as Satan does and got rebellious and prideful, and they didn't understand why Moses and Aaron were raised up. Well, that's always the way God does it. He raises up the people that others least expect. So, but as far as your question, I don't have a lot of opinion on it, except other than that it's a blood type that you have to be careful with when you're pregnant, and can have more susceptibility to having severe immune responses. So biblically, I don't see where it would have any significance. If you know something more, fill me in.